So you've seen the cruise side. Now Richard's going to tie in the touring side.
Absolutely. And as
Great.
I saw from Martin there, Charlie, it's there's no accidental tourists in where he's going. And I say the same. When I was here last, I did the beautiful Newfoundland and Labrador, which Martin has covered some of that today. And as you said, we are a traditional land tour operator, and we do motor coach tours, both for small group and large group. The small group maxing at 26 and the large at 46 on 55 passenger coaches in both cases. And thrilled to be talking about the Maritime provinces this time around.
Last time we saw you, Richard. So as you can see, Richard is the Director of Fund, President of Atlantic Tours based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Last time we saw Richard, it was all about Newfoundland and Labrador. This time you're taking us on your Canadian Maritimes tour. So please, just for the real basics, can you explain what are the Maritime provinces?
The Maritime provinces are the easterly provinces of Canada, located on the Atlantic Ocean. So in the insert map there, you can see the map of Canada, and circled are the Maritime provinces, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. And off to the right would be Newfoundland and Labrador that we covered off last. And when we refer to the four provinces together, we call them Atlantic Canada, and without Newfoundland, we call them the Maritime provinces. I always like to say that Canada kind of began here. Two of the original provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, along with Quebec and Ontario, made up Canada, and the last province to join Canada was Newfoundland and Labrador. So a lot of early history here, lots of seafaring heritage and stories. And today I'm going to take us through our 13-day maritime tour. So this is the itinerary here, 13 days. It's a fairly all-inclusive tour in the respect that there's breakfast every day and one other meal every day. So, lots included, lots of sightseeing, lots of UNESCO World Heritage sites. And this tour would be the one you would normally do before Newfoundland if you're going to combine them. So you can see here in the blue, and the text would be at the end of this trip, you would stay on in Cape Breton. Our Newfoundland tour would leave Halifax, pick you up in Cape Breton, and we would continue to Newfoundland. If you have clients that don't have time to do 23 days or even 13 days, we do have two shorter versions of this trip, a Bay of Fundy focused trip that's 7 days in length, or the Enchanting Island, which is 8 days in length. And I've thrown in the Newfoundland itinerary just so that you can see where you'd begin that program if you were to do the complete 23-day expedition. All of our tours begin in Halifax. That's our arrival gateway, the best airport into the region, or I should say the biggest airport into the region, with much more lift. What you're seeing here in this picture is the capital city of Halifax. It's located on the second largest natural harbor in the world, the first being Sydney, Australia. Ice-free year-round. And from the fortification, Citadel Hill at the top, to the waterfront and down even to the cruise ship here, it's about a 20-minute walk. So it's a very walkable city, other than it is built on a hill. So we do what you call the zigzag. Rather than the straight walk up the hill, we go down a street, up a street, and locally call it the zigzag. So after that first night, your accommodations included and a welcome reception. The next morning, we begin our adventure by going to the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Joggins. And Joggins is a spot on the Bay of Fundy, where I'll be talking about a little bit later, where you can pick up and hold in your hand fossils. You'll learn all about it, and you'll learn about the great waterway behind you, those Bay of Fundy tides. From here, we go into the province of New Brunswick, and we go out on a lobster boat, where you'll actually learn all about lobster fishing. You'll get to haul up a lobster trap and have your lobster dinner right on the boat, Acadian style. A great experience for everyone. After your dinner, you're going to do an overnight in the city of Moncton, the bilingual city. It's French and English. New Brunswick is Canada's only truly bilingual province. And the river you're seeing here is the Petitcodiac River, which is one of the rivers that's famous for the tidal bore. And this, most of our rivers on the Bay of Fundy are tidal rivers with very little outflow of water, but when the tide comes in, that 54-foot tide or 18 or 17-meter tide, there's a drastic difference in the water in the river. From there, we're going to go out to Hopewell Cape, which we call the Giant Flower Pot Rocks. And from these pictures, you can see how you can walk on the ocean floor. And as the tide starts to come in this the middle shot, and eventually you can be kayaking or boating in the Bay of Fundy. And
Love it.
those tides are quite famous.
I was going to say, so the tides is a really significant part for this region, right? So can you just tell us a little bit about that significance and you know, the impact of tides on your life?
Well, yeah, I mean, the everyday life for a Nova Scotian on the Bay of Fundy or a New Brunswicker on the Bay of Fundy would be that the tides change, as they do all over the world, but we have to regulate our life based on when the tide's coming in and the tide's going out. It's not much use to have a boat sitting high and dry in the mud like you see here. So if you want to go out, you go out with the tide in the morning, and you come back in with the tide when it's coming back in the afternoon, or whenever the tide happens to be. It might be in the middle of the night. So our life is pretty much controlled by that. The churning of that water in the Bay of Fundy, the world's highest tides, make it a popular seafaring destination, and certainly a lot of wildlife and whales and such that you'll see as well. We're going to do a 2-night stay in the city port of St. John, New Brunswick. It's a loyalist community. When the US became a country, a lot of people wanted to stay loyal to the British Crown and came and settled in Atlantic Canada. And St. John was one of these loyalist cities, located right on the Bay of Fundy. You get a great view here. Off to your right would be the Bay of Fundy. On the left is the St. John River. The bridge that you're seeing is over a gorge, and we call this reversing falls because the gorge is 16 feet in depth drop. And when the tide comes in, it pushes the water back up this river, making a slack tide that boats can go through. That's the only time that boats can go through here. And then it pushes another 15 feet up that river. So it's quite a spectacle to see on the reversing of these tides. And we, of course, give you a couple opportunities to see that. You can see a cruise ship in the background. So most of our port cities are cruise ship destinations as well. The Bay of Fundy is one of the favorite spots for whale watching. It's the summer feeding ground for the North American endangered right whale, where there's less than 300 left in the world. But we also have other types of whales, humpbacks, pot whales, dolphins. It's just a great spot for whale watching.
Yeah, and what about the sea life or wildlife on these trips? Any other highlights?
Well, one of the nice things here, when we do our boat tour to see the whales, we go out amongst the islands and learn all about the topography and the landscape. You're going to see lots of bald eagles and perhaps seals right in the St. John River under that reversing falls bridge. So there's lots of opportunities, as I said, to learn about our seafaring heritage. After our 2 nights in St. John, we're going to cross the Bay of Fundy on this ferry you see here, the Fundy Rose, and we're going to end up in a community called Digby. And Digby is the scallop capital of the world. They have the famous scallop fleet. We stay at this property, the beautiful Digby Pines Resort, overlooking the Bay of Fundy. So you can sit in your room or in one of the patios or out on the pool deck watching the tides work. The next day, we're going to travel where I grew up, the beautiful Annapolis Valley, some of the most fertile fruit growing land in Canada. And when I was a young boy, a lot of apple orchards. The apple orchards are still there, but now we're growing a lot of grapes. We're on the same lines of latitude as the great European wine growing countries. And so we have about 30 wineries producing very good wine. And we even have our own appellation called Tidal Bay. This is one of the wineries that we visit, Planters Ridge. We learn all about that beautiful land you see in the background. This is all part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So when the French first came in the 1600s, they built these elaborate dikes, and that kept the Bay of Fundy away, but very fertile land. We also support local, and we were doing culinary tourism before it was even fashionable. We've always use local fish and meats and fruit and vegetables. And you see a bottle of Tidal Bay there in the bag. And our strawberry season is always in June, fresh local peaches. And, certainly some of my favorites is our wonderful seafood. I mean, the scallops, the oysters, the clams and mussels, and of course, the lobster, along with our Atlantic salmon, our haddock, halibut, all of that very plentiful
Seeing
here.
these pictures of the food and the wine, Richard, say it's a big part of the trip, right? And it's all
Absolutely.
before it was fashionable.
Exactly. Lots of choices on the menu and well prepared seafood. So if you're a seafood lover, but our beef is excellent as well, because as I said, we're a farming destination as well. Our local produce, and many of our restaurants are farm to table. So you'll see lots of opportunity to be eating local and enjoying the cuisine. This is the Grand Pre National Historic Site and UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this tells the story of our early French settlers and the deportation in 1755. Not one of the best parts of our history, but you learn all about the Acadians, and they eventually ended up down in Louisiana, and we know them today as Cajun. So we have lots of close family ties, and you learn about all of this on your tour. We return to Halifax for a 2-night stay. And we're going to then go out for a day trip to beautiful Peggy's Cove. It's kind of a moonscape, solid bedrock, a community of about 60 people. One of the most photographed spots there is the lighthouse. And we go there for breakfast before it gets crowded. A nice spot to enjoy breakfast overlooking the St. Margaret's Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. In the afternoon, we go to the UNESCO World Heritage Town of Lunenburg. We learn all about the famous schooners from there, and once again, a chance to have a nice historic walking tour of the town, and then end up at the Red Buildings, which is the Fisheries Museum of the Atlantic. You can go on some of the famous schooners and learn about the making of boats, and once again, touch tanks to see a lot of the fish. Then on to Mahone Bay, famous for its 5 churches, and once again, beautiful seaside crafts-oriented town. And then we're going to head from Nova Scotia over to Prince Edward Island by way of the Confederation Bridge, a 13-kilometer bridge taking us over to beautiful Prince Edward Island. We're going to visit the National Historic Site of Green Gables and learn all about Lucy Maud Montgomery, the author who created the Anne of Green Gables novels, and tour Prince Edward Island National Park, Canada's smallest national park, and the beautiful patchwork quilt of colors that the island makes up. It's a farming island. There's no rock. It has to be imported to make the roads. And a lot of potatoes and onions and fresh produce are farmed here, but just a truly stunning area. And then here's another great shot of the sand dunes and the beautiful beaches and some of the crops before they're harvested. So we do a 2-night stay in Charlottetown, which is kind of the cradle of Confederation, and the fact that the first talks of Canada were held there before we became a country. But remember, I said Prince Edward Island didn't join until 5 years after. They wanted to make sure it worked first. And then we're going to leave Prince Edward Island by ferry and head to beautiful Cape Breton Island, where we spend 2 nights in Bedeck, right on the lake, the Bredor Lake, a beautiful brackish lake with salt and fresh water. And we visit this museum, a tribute to Alexander Graham Bell. We know him for the telephone, but he was an inventor of many other things, early flight, hydrofoil, and this really pays tribute to the work with the deaf and so many of his great abilities. Then we spend a full day on the Cabot Trail, one of the most scenic highways in the world. A great opportunity, obviously, to see wildlife, especially moose. We have a great population of moose. And our fall colors are spectacular as well, if anyone comes during our fall season. The following day, we go over to the beautiful French community of Louisbourg. And this was a fortification built in the early 1700s. It's animated, and it tells the story of what a rough life it would have been during that time. But the whole, we see a good chunk of a restoration here, and a great opportunity to learn about the early history before traveling back to Halifax, where our trip ends. Should you be going on to Newfoundland and Labrador, we take you back to a hotel in Sydney for a free afternoon for you to rest or do laundry. And then the tour from Halifax picks you up in Sydney. We go to dinner and then do the overnight ferry with full cabins to Newfoundland and Labrador. So I've stuck to my time there again. That's almost impossible for me with the way I like to chat, Charlie, but here we are.
So well.
I should say we also do Our guaranteed departure trips is what I'm talking about. We have the small group, large group that I mentioned, but we also do a huge amount of customization, tailor-made programs for other companies, small groups, whatever their interest may be. We also do a lot of self-drives as well. All of our escorted tours are self-drivable. So if you have guests that's better suited for, just remember that the distances, even though it looks small on the map, the distances are quite substantial. And, we recommend certainly a better enjoyment with all the commentary from our great tour managers. But if self-drive is what you want, we're happy to build that for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I said before, yeah, you've done a 13-day trip in 13 minutes. Thank you.
Pretty much.
Definitely a better pace when you're actually on the trip.
Absolutely.
But thank you. It's such a great way to see the trip and to learn about the destination and all those options and different ways that you put it together. Thank you so much, Richard. Really appreciate it.